بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So we continue reading from the Al-Ghazali's 40 Fundamentals of Religion or the Religion, and we read yesterday the foreword written by Sheikh Abdul Rahman ibn Yusuf Manjera, Jazakallah khairan. And today we'll continue with the rather kind of short introduction by the translator. And then we will move to Imam Al-Ghazali's preface. And though I wrote in the description of these videos that I am using the Turath Publishing English translation edition, if you will. And the Arabic, if I make a reference to the Arabic text, I'm using the Dar al-Minhaj edition, Al-Arba fi Usul al-Din, of course. So, now to the translator's introduction. He said, Jazakallah khairan. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is to Allah, and may Allah bless and give peace to our Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to his family and his companions, and those who follow them in excellence until the day of recompense. And that's a beautiful notion. Follow them, usually bi ihsan, in excellence. And definitely the etymology, the root word, it's basically the husn, beauty. And Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he asked about Islam, asked about Iman, and he asked about ihsan, excellence. إن الله كتب الإحسان على كل شيء. So we need to reach that level of excellence when we perform any deed, whether it's a direct form of worship, or really what might consider a mundane job. It is reaching the level of beauty, and it's really now we are beyond the function to that degree of beauty. Even in the Quran refers to the horses, for example, that there is beauty in them. وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا جَمَالٌ حِينَ تُرِيحُونَ. But that's after of course, the context also mentions that the function, the role, the job. What do you do with horses? Yes, but beauty should be there, and you can see it when books are published. I mean, books could be also, yes, the information is there, but what defines the Dar al-Minhaj books, about Imam Al-Ghazali's books, is that the print is very nice. It's very easy for the eye to read and to decipher. You feel comfortable. Unlike, for example, the electronic text that does not differentiate between one paragraph and the other, between one chapter and the other, is simply ongoing at any rate. And those who follow them in excellence until the day of recompense, inshallah, will be amongst them. Before you is the work of the Proof of Islam, Hujjat al-Islam, Imam Abu Hamid, Muhammad bin Muhammad Al-Ghazali, radiallahu anhu, the 40 Principles of the Religion. And of course, he's maybe we should not spend time on this, but Ghazali, نسبة إلى غزالة, أو نسبة basically also whether it's Ghazala, the village, or the profession of his father. He was a wool spinner, Ghazal, and hence Ghazali. But it's difficult really to use it all the time. It is an immensely valuable work that he wrote toward the end of his life. He structured the work in four parts: the first dealing with basic creed, the second with external deeds such as worship, the third with purifying the self from destructive character traits, and finally the fourth discussing how to adorn oneself with good character. Imam Al-Ghazali was a brilliant teacher and had an incredible gift for illustrating his often profound insights on human nature and behavior. On human nature and behavior. The 40 Principles contains elements found in his other works, such as the Beginning of Guidance, the Path of the Worshippers, so Bidayat Hidayah, Minhaj al-Abidin, and most notably, his magnum opus, the revival of the religious sciences, Ihya Ulum, of which this work is essentially an abridgment. Of course, adapted because the first part is not is the least identical. We spoke about this yesterday at any rate. It presents to the reader, step by step, a tried and proven method for spiritual development and improving one's relationship with both the Creator and the creation. And the right relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will entail the right relationship, inshallah, with existence, with all creation, with humanity, of course. The proof of Islam, Imam Abu Muhammad Al-Ghazali was born in 450 Islamic calendar, and that's approximately 1058 of the Common Era in Tus, Iran. Usually we say in Tus, Khurasan. Uh, a nation state is a nation state, but probably the implications once you say the word Iran, uh, God knows what comes to one's mind, because today Iran is predominantly Shiite, and during the time of Imam Al-Ghazali, that region was Sunnite, and many of our famous scholars came from that region. I mean, Imam Al-Ghazali, one of them. Imam Hamid Joini is one of them. A Muslim who basically collected the hadith in his Sahih, his Nisaburi, and beyond. Al-Bukhari is still beyond that region, but at any rate, it was Sunnite for a long time. This is what it is. And in fact, all the Nizamiya schools, colleges, if you will, because sometimes they use here the word seminary, and I don't know whether this is really the right uh, description. They're more of a place for the ulama. Of course, anyone could have joined as student, but also ulama were involved in these colleges. But primarily, it was Shafi'ite, and not only Shafi'ite in terms of jurisprudence, Ash'ari in terms of theology, and of course Sufi, I would say, that spiritually. So he was Imam Al-Ghazali was jurist, legal theorist, logician, theologian, and mystic. Was a master of both the outer and inner sciences of the Sharia. His contributions to the Islamic intellectual tradition bear witness to why he became known as the Proof of Islam. He was a leading authority of the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence, and his work, Al-Wajiz, is the foundation for over a dozen of the most important works in the school. الوجيز, because البسيط, الوسيط, الوجيز, we mentioned them yesterday, 3 books on the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence. Simply one is more expanded than the other. His book on legal theory, Al-Mustasfa, is a seminal work on the subject and studied until this day, from Al-Azhar to Al-Quds University, to his refutation of Avicenna, Ibn Sina, and his ilk, The Incoherence of the Philosophers, is considered by many to have dealt a death blow to Aristotelian philosophy in the Muslim world and consolidated the dominance of Sunni theology. Let us be clear that Imam Al-Ghazali was not against every activity of the philosophers, and in Al-Munqidh al-Dalal it is very clear he was against their metaphysics, but he had no problem, let's say, with logic. He had no problem with the sciences, exact sciences, because philosophers at the time would engage in math. They would, the we call today biology, طبيعيات. So ultimately, his problem was in the of metaphysics. Back to why Nizam al-Mulk established these schools, these colleges in major cities. And Baghdad had a major one that was probably the most prominent, but Nishapur, of course, had its own share of professors and famous students. Mosul had two. I mean, if one would, Nizam al-Mulk, rahmullah, knew that he should protect the aqidah of people, the Sunni theology. This reminds me also of Saeed al-Nursi, though he was involved in politics, though he defended basically his Islamic lands, and he ended up as a prisoner of war in Siberia and all these things. But ultimately decided to give up on politics altogether and to concentrate on protecting the aqidah of people. And by the way, he saw himself, if anyone who's familiar with Sayyid Nursi, he saw himself as following the footsteps of Al-Ghazali one way or the other. He mentioned this about himself. So this work at the height of his career, while teaching at the Nizamiya seminar in Baghdad, Imam Al-Ghazali experienced a spiritual crisis that resulted in a 10-year self-imposed exile. I would say 11 probably is more likely, but that doesn't really make a difference. It was during this period that he authored the revival of religious sciences. And we can see now the difference between the introduction of Manjera and the introduction of the translator, Samir Abdul Salam. Manjera said, and we spoke about this yesterday, that it was after his the end of his journey, and what the translator said here about during this period is more likely, and I explained why. It was during this period that he authored the Revival of Islamic Sciences, a masterpiece composed of 40 books that explores the spiritual depth of virtually every aspect of Islam. The 40 principles of the religion is largely based on the revival and is the Revival of Islamic Sciences, that is Ihya Ulum, and is similarly formatted. Similarly, to a certain degree, that's why it is called adapted summary. It was originally a part of a broader work entitled Jews of the Quran, Jawahir al-Quran. But Imam Al-Ghazali gave permission for it to be published as an independent work due to its comprehensive, albeit concise nature. In translating the text, I try to maintain the conversational tone of Imam Al-Ghazali. Remember that Ihya Ulum, he has these beautiful uh, questions that engage the reader. If you say, so these are, if you say, then the answer is, but really it brings the reader into it includes the reader in the text itself. If you say in the first person, he responds in the first person, so he's definitely, it is more, everybody knows that the first person does have a positive impact on the reader. Whenever an idiom was used, I opted for the idiomatic or for an idiomatic translation with a corresponding English phrase in order to remain faithful to the intended meaning as opposed to a literal rendering. There are also some terms that I left in the original Arabic due to them either having no English equivalent or because they are now incorporated into the English lexicon. The referencing is in accordance with the Arabic convention. The voice of Imam Al-Ghazali, who passed away in 505, and the translator is 1112, it's 1111, most likely is just as relevant and urgent now as it was over 900 years ago. It is my prayer that Allah benefits us through the knowledge of this great Imam and places this translation on the scale of his good deeds. End of the translator's introduction. Now to the author's preface. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, from whom we seek help. The 40 Principles of the religion, is a third additional section of the Jewels of the Quran. An appendix, if you will. Perhaps you say these verses, which you have presented in the second section, comprise various types of knowledge and practices. It is possible to distinguish their objectives and elaborate upon what was summarized in a more detailed, analytical manner, enabling a person to reflect upon each one from its proper perspective. This is so that he may come to know the details of the gates of bliss regarding both knowledge and practice, so that attaining their keys becomes easy for him through perseverance and reflection. To this I say, yes, that is possible, and I will distinguish it for you if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. The sum of its objectives is divided into knowledge and practice, while practice itself is divided into outer practice and inner practice. Finally, inner practice is divided into purification and adornment. Thus, there are four divisions: knowledge, outer practice, blameworthy characteristics from which it is required to purify oneself, and praiseworthy characteristics with which it is required to adorn oneself. Each division goes back to 10 principles. Hence, the name of this section is the 40 Principles of the Religion. Whoever wishes to write it as a separate work may do so, for indeed it comprises the quintessence of Quranic knowledge. The Arba'in Fusul Din, the Arabic version of Tab'a Dar al-Minhaj, of the Dar al-Minhaj edition, it does have a third party, if you will, or whatever you'd like to call it, probably a student of Al-Ghazali who said in the introduction خطبة الكتاب: كتبنا من كتاب الجواهر في القرآن القسم الثالث المصنف للإمام حجة الإسلام لقاه الله رضوانه وأسكنه الجنان بعد إذنه لمن أراد أن يكتب منه هذا القسم مفردا، إذ هو قد أفرده بالاسم وسماه كتاب الأربعين في أصول الدين. So these lines show that here we have a student writing this third section of Jawahir al-Quran, which is really the Arba'in, the 40 fundamentals of the religion. And he says that the Imam Hujjat al-Islam, he with with a prayer, he said that. Then he said that he permitted for anyone to write this section separately, and I think it's an important. It's very important for the verification of the text. It's very important. Also, it shows a deep respect for the scholars, because he said that he permitted, otherwise they would not have done it. So people were not free, although there were those who would tamper with text, or at least they would attribute certain books to a famous scholar, so that the book would be widely disseminated. But it's a very beautiful thing. It's extremely beautiful that they respect the will of Imam Al-Ghazali in this case. Ultimately, it's about adab. Really, it's all about adab. In politics, it's about adab, which is very lacking, really. In economics, it's about adab, and it's lacking, justice. In the social realm, it's about adab. So it's in every respect, and that's a beautiful thing. Part 1: the sum of knowledge and its principles, which are 10. The first principle out of these 40, and here he begins basically with faith, with Islamic theology, the divine essence. We say, all praise is for Allah, who through his book revealed upon the tongue of his prophetic emissary made known to his slaves the following about his essence: he is unique, without partner, alone, without a likeness, absolute, without an opponent, and one without an equal. Furthermore, he is sempiternal, without a cause, eternal, without a beginning, perpetually existent, without an end, everlasting, without finality, self-subsistent, without fail, ongoing, without cessation. He has always been, and will never cease to be described with the qualities of majesty. The passing of ages has no effect on him. Rather, he is the first and the last, the external and the internal, the knowledgeable of everything. At that, of course, there could be no partners, in, and there should be no partners. Uh, and even the atheists realize that you can go to a point in this universe, in fact, to the moment when there was no universe practically, to the Big Bang Theory, to that moment. And ultimately, It cannot be the case that if there is nothing, they admit that there was no matter. Otherwise, we cannot say that it was the beginning of the universe. There was no matter. They admit there was nothing, and of course, you cannot existence cannot bring itself into existence, and physics, becoming bio cannot happen on its own. And it's if dead matter cannot really create life on its own, then no surprise that we have compared to Earth, compared to matter, we have about 100 billion neurons in our brains, and we still cannot make anything bio, really. And there is such a society that is almost 75 years old of scholars who has one mission only from the 1950s, last century until today. Their aim is to create life, and they haven't been successful, and they will not be successful. This is the idea. Uh, it it's necessary, the necessary existence that in His essence, Subhanahu wa Taala, is one. The notion of Samad comes. The Samadiyya, though some Muslim scholars over these they have used an explanation that is true but is very inappropriate. But really, it is the self-subsistent. That's what it is, because everything in the universe depends on Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, depends on something else, and as such, there is no resemblance, nothing, nobody, no one can partake in this. And the notion of Qadim is very profound, and only Allah Subhanahu wa Taala can be described with that. For everything else is accidental, and if it's accidental, it is bound by time and space, and it means that there is a beginning and there is an end for the accidental. Only Allah Subhanahu wa Taala could be described in that fashion. He was not caused. Everything else is, just to put it, yes. And you cannot really regress indefinitely, and we know this. There has to be a beginning. And Qayyum la inqita' lah, because that's how the universe is maintained. Subhanallah. دائم ولا انصرام له، لم يزل ولا يزال موصوفا من عوت الجلال، لا يقضي عليه بالانقضاء تصرم الآماد وانقراض الأجال. Because for us, the passing of time does lead to our end. We change and we die, and ultimately even the universe itself will come to an end. وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرٍّ لَهَا. That the sun is hastening to its to final state of rest, of the end of the sun. And there are all these stars really in the universe that died or dying. SubhanAllah. بل هو الأول والآخر والظاهر والباطن وهو بكل شيء Alim. And this is really, we don't know everything. And we'll always have more questions than answers. More questions than answers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ولا يحيطون شيء من علمه إلا بما شاء. Cumulative knowledge of humanity from day one, from Adam alayhi salam until the very last person on earth on the day of judgment. Cumulative knowledge is partial. It's enough. It's enough for us for the practical things that what we have. It's enough for us to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, that we should surrender to his will, as the prophets described themselves before. وَإِنِّي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ حَنِيفًا مُسْلِمًا. They have surrendered. The prophets surrendered themselves, and they ought to. They knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better than their followers. So the knowledge that we have is enough for us to surrender. It's enough for us for the practical things. And we are aided by revelation. Reason is not left to its own. And when reason is left to its own, away from religion, and we don't talk about organized religion in the sense that really confiscates the right to do research, and as like it was the case of the church in medieval times, the Dark Ages. No, reason is Imam Al-Ghazali says that practical revelation comes. There are two parts. One of them we talk about the revealed books, and the other is reason, because without reason you cannot really understand, grasp, decipher the message. And the role of the prophets were always also to explain the messages that they came with. Ultimately, it's the ego that prevents the human being from following the prophets. That's about it. So I think we should stop right here, and بإذن Azza wa Jal, we start tomorrow with the second principle, transcendence, التقديس. جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.